The rain didn't fall that day, but the sky was gray, heavy with the weight of grief, and so was my heart. I stood beside the polished wooden coffin that held the man I called Dad for as long as I could remember. My suit felt tighter than usual, the collar strangling my breath as the priest read psalms that barely registered in my ears. People I hadn't seen in years had come to pay their respects, friends, colleagues, distant relatives, but none of their faces mattered to me. I kept staring at the box that was about to be lowered into the ground, trying to accept that this chapter was closing forever. Before we dive into the story, we'll love to thank you for your continued support to this channel. If you enjoy this story and stories like this, kindly subscribe and hit on the notification button so you don't miss any of our stories. Tell us your name and where you're watching from in the comments section. We'll love to give you a shout out in our next video. Now let's begin. Just as the final prayer ended, silence hovered like a thick fog over the cemetery. Then, out of nowhere, my mother's voice sliced through the air like broken glass. "He was never your father," she shouted, trembling furious. "He took you in out of pity. You were never his blood." Gasps rippled through the crowd like waves after a bomb dropped. I turned, frozen, as every head snapped in our direction. My eyes locked with hers, disbelief clenching my chest so hard I thought I'd pass out. "But she wasn't done. He did it for your mother. She dumped you on us and vanished. He didn't owe you anything." At that moment, the funeral ceased to be about grief. It became a cruel stage for humiliation. I saw judgment in the eyes of people who once admired me, confusion on the faces of those who knew nothing of my supposed real history. But what crushed me more than their looks was the betrayal standing right in front of me. This woman, the one who held me as a baby, kissed my forehead on sleepless nights, and told me bedtime stories, was now erasing my entire existence with a few vicious words. And yet, deep down, a small, dark voice whispered that she had always held a certain distance I couldn't explain. Maybe now I knew why. I didn't say a word. I didn't ask for clarity or shout in defense. Instead, I looked at her one last time and turned away. I walked straight past the priest, the mourners, and the man lowering the casket. I walked out of that graveyard and into a silence I've never felt before, a silence so deafening. It swallowed every thought, every memory, every heartbeat I had left. I went home, packed a small duffel bag, and left without even glancing at my childhood bedroom. I didn't leave a note. I didn't tell a soul. I vanished, just like she said my real mother once did. For months, I lived out of cheap motels and quiet ghost houses under a different name, scraping by with remote work that didn't require showing my face. I didn't check my messages. I changed my number. I deleted every trace of the life I once knew. Nights were the hardest. I dream of my dad's voice, his laugh echoing across fishing trips, his proud grin at my college graduation, the way he'd say, "That's my boy," with so much pride I could feel it in my bones. If he wasn't my father, then why did it feel like losing him was losing everything? Then, one morning, as I sipped bitter coffee in a rundown cafe in another city, my phone buzzed with a voicemail. The number was unfamiliar, but something in me made me listen. "Good morning," the voice began, formal and calm. "This is David Clark from the office of Mason and Hart. We're reaching out regarding the estate of the late Mr. Andrew Whitaker. You've been named in his will. Please return our call at your earliest convenience." My fingers went numb. I replayed it 3 times. My throat tightened. Named in his will? He had left something for me? For the first time in weeks, I felt something crack inside me: curiosity, confusion, hope. I called the number back. Mr. Clark answered, as professional as before. "Yes, we've been trying to reach you. Mr. Whitaker left behind a personal letter and specified that you should receive it privately, along with other matters of inheritance." I swallowed hard and agreed to meet him. That night, I barely slept. If what my mother said was true, then why would a man who had no obligation to me still think of me after death? What did he know? That she didn't want me to? The law office stood on a quiet street lined with old maple trees and brick buildings that hadn't changed in decades. I sat in the waiting area, hands clenched, heart thudding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The receptionist offered me water. I declined. What I needed wasn't hydration. It was answers. Real ones. When Mr. Clark finally stepped into the room, his glasses slid low on his nose, and he greeted me with a calm nod. "Mr. Whitaker," he said. Hearing my father's name next to mine nearly broke me all over again. He led me into a dark wood office that smelled faintly of leather and old ink. "Thank you for coming," he began as he pulled out a slim manila folder from a drawer. "Before we proceed, I must tell you your father was very specific about the timing of this meeting. He anticipated conflict." I nodded, already expecting that. Mr. Clark opened the folder and handed me an envelope, my name written in familiar, looping handwriting across the front. It stopped my breath. I stared at it, tracing each letter like it was sacred. "Take your time," the lawyer said softly. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside, on thick cream paper, was a letter. A real one. His voice spilled from the ink like he was right there beside me. "Son," it began. "If you're reading this, then I'm no longer around to tell you what I should have said 100 times over. You are my son. I don't care what blood says. I raised you, I loved you, and I was proud of every inch of the man you became." My eyes blurred with tears I'd sworn I wouldn't shed. He knew. He knew the truth. And he still chose me. That meant everything. The letter continued, explaining what my mother had never told me, that I had been left at his doorstep by a woman he once loved, a woman who disappeared weeks later without a trace. "I wasn't prepared to raise a child," he wrote, "but the moment I held you, I knew I'd never let you go. You were mine from that day forward, and I never regretted a second of it." He wrote about the day I first called him Dad, how he'd cried in secret, how every milestone, my first tooth, my scraped knees, my high school diploma, meant more to him than anything he ever achieved. Mr. Clark gave me a moment, then reached across the table and laid out several documents. "Your father transferred ownership of his vineyard to you 6 months before his passing. It's in full operation, valued at over $3 million. You also inherit the house and the foundation he started in your name. Your mother," he paused delicately, "was removed from all documents after an incident involving a verbal attack during your father's final hospital stay." My stomach turned. So she'd been cruel even when he was dying. She knew, and she hated the part of me that reminded her she never had control. I stared at the stack of paperwork, stunned. I didn't want the money, the land, or the house, not at that moment. What I wanted was to go back in time, to sit beside the man who gave me everything and tell him he was enough, that I always saw him as my real father, even if blood said otherwise. But grief doesn't offer second chances. It offers consequences. And I had one final responsibility to fulfill, not for revenge, but for clarity. I thanked Mr. Clark and stood to leave. He looked at me thoughtfully and asked, "Will you be pressing charges against your mother for her attempt to contest the estate?" I shook my head slowly and replied, "No, I have a better idea." I stood outside the house I'd once called home, watching the lights flicker from behind familiar curtains. The wind blew faintly, stirring dust across the front porch where I used to sit with Dad on quiet evenings, talking about life over lemonade. My hands clutched a folder, legal, final, and undeniable. The property now belonged to me, every inch of it. And she, the woman who once screamed that I was never part of this family, had no idea what was coming. I rang the bell once and waited. When she opened the door and saw me, her mouth fell open. "You," she muttered. "You have some nerve." I raised my hand, cutting her off with calm, practiced restraint. "No yelling today," I said firmly. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here to talk." She folded her arms, still wearing that permanent sneer, the same one that echoed through the cemetery when she tried to rip my soul apart. "Make it quick," she hissed. "I don't owe you anything." I stepped inside, glancing at the hallway I'd grown up in, now colder than I remembered. "You're right," I said. "You don't owe me anything." "But Dad, he did. And he made sure I wouldn't forget it." She froze as I dropped the folder on the dining table. The same one where we used to have birthday dinners. What's this? She snapped, flipping it open. Her eyes darted across the pages and then widened. This is a deed. I nodded. Yes. You've been living in a house that doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to me. He left it to me, along with everything else, his vineyard, his savings, even the scholarship fund you tried to block. Her hands began to shake. This can't be right. He wouldn't do this to me. I stared at her, steady. No. But you did it to yourself. I pulled out one last envelope and handed it to her. What's this? She asked, voice cracking. Your official eviction notice. You have 30 days to move out. She gasped, then screamed, You ungrateful bastard. After all I did for you. I let her rage spill out. Let her shout. Let her curse. Then I spoke, slow and firm. You called me a pity case at his funeral. You wanted to erase me from his legacy. But he made sure I'd remember who he really was. You may have carried me into this world, but you never truly mothered me. He fathered me with love, patience, and pride. She slumped into a chair, defeated. I watched the mask fall from her face, and for a brief moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. But then I remembered every silent moment she let me wonder if I ever belonged. Every cold shoulder, every calculated jab. She didn't just lie, she tried to unmake me. So I walked away. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. I simply left the house she no longer owned and returned to the legacy that was now mine. Weeks later, I reopened the vineyard, not as Whitaker Wines, but as Andrew's Promise. I started a youth foundation in his name, mentoring boys without fathers, because I knew what it meant to be chosen, not by blood, but by love. Every year, I donate part of the profits to orphan support programs. And every bottle carries a message on the label. Family isn't who you come from. It's who never lets you go. Dad wasn't my biological father, but he was the only man who stood by me when it counted. And in the end, he didn't just leave me a fortune. He left me proof that I was worth loving, from beginning to end. Have you ever discovered a hidden truth that changed everything you believed about family? If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Drop a comment below and tell us, what does real family mean to you? We read every story. We feel every word. And you are not alone.